Welcome, dear dreamer. Tonight, we travel deep into the mist-veiled corners of Middle-earth to a place unmarked on any map, where old magic still lingers in moss and stone. You'll walk beside a creature of shadow and sorrow, Maulog, once. A beast feared in tale and song, but tonight you'll hear his true story, a tale of love unexpected, and a goodbye long foretold. In the quiet space between day and night, Maulog found her, a star in the forest, an elf who looked upon him not with fear, but with wonder. And for a time, the darkness dimmed. For a time, he believed in light. But all things in Middle-earth are shaped by time, and time has many endings. Before we begin, take this moment to settle into stillness. Breathe with me now. Inhale through your nose, softly, and exhale. Let it go. One more. Deep breath in, hold it gently, and release. Let the story carry you now. Let the words wrap you like a cloak in twilight. You are safe here, wherever you are. And if you enjoy this journey into the deeper myths of Middle-earth, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and explore our ever-growing playlist of ASMR fantasy tales. There are many more stories waiting for you in the quiet dark. Now, let us begin the tale of the morning of Maulog. In a forgotten cleft beneath the mountains of mist, where sunlight had not walked in an age, and the air hung with the damp perfume of earth and old lichen, there dwelled a creature called Maulog, or so he had been named long ago, by those who feared him before names held any sweetness at all. His body was a strange and stooped shape, half flesh and half forged, his skin a tough slate darkened by the oils of the cavern and the smoke of old wars. His eyes, dim and golden, like a forger's last embers, had not seen daylight in an age, but they saw in echoes. And it was with these ember eyes that he carved the darkness, alone and slow, waiting not for death, but for time to forget him. The mountain hummed above him, stone on stone, whispering lullabies only the earth could remember, and sometimes he would hum back. No one came to this place now. The dwarves had sealed the old passages and forgotten their fear of him, and the goblins did not like the silence. Birds never flew this deep, and the trees above had long surrendered their roots to stone. But Maulog remained, bound not by chains, but by guilt and something older. Perhaps shame, or perhaps something closer to hope that refused to die, properly the way other things did. He was not born, not like the others. No mother held him, no lullaby cradled his sleep. He had been wrought, shaped beneath Angband, in the time when fire was God and cruelty was an art, and though the Dark One fell and the world cracked and reformed, Maulog remained, a relic of a war no longer remembered by those who now ruled. The light. Yet in dreams, he wandered places he had never seen, white trees that whispered, lakes that glowed silver, voices that sang not of war but of stars and stillness. He did not understand these dreams, and sometimes they frightened him. But still he dreamed them, and in dreaming changed. It was in one such dreaming that the air in his cave shifted, a scent unlike ash or dust, green, bright, unbearable in its beauty. And then a voice, clear and curious, like wind, dancing over water. Who sings in the dark where no light is born, it said, not afraid, only wondering. And Maulog, startled from his humming, froze like ice under footfall. No one had spoken to him in 1,000 years. He thought to retreat, to vanish into deeper stone, but something in that voice, something like song, held him fast. And when she stepped from the shadows with lantern light dancing like stars, in her eyes he felt something fracture inside him, soft and frightening. She was an elf, robed in pale grey, her hair the colour of starlight, her hands unarmed. She had not come for war, nor for legend. She had come seeking the hum, and had found the last voice of the forgotten. Maulog dared not speak, but she did not ask for words. She sat near the edge of his cave, where root and rock kissed, and she listened, not to chase him away, but to listen. And Maulog, who had not been seen in an age, was seen. Truly seen. That night, when she left, she whispered only one thing into the stone: "I will return if you sing again." And her footsteps left no echo, only stillness. But the cave no longer hummed alone. Maulog waited, and the waiting felt like warmth. Lantern light between us. She returned on the 5th evening, though to Maulog it felt like the length of an age. 5 sunless dawns in the deep rock, where no wind moved and no stars looked down. And then, there she was again, her pale lantern slicing the gloom like a memory of light, her eyes soft with something he did not understand and did not know he wanted. She did not knock or cry out, but stepped gently across the damp stone, her feet bare and silent, and when she reached the place where the roots brushed the cavern's air, she sat again, as if she had never left. Maulog had not moved from his place in the shadows, but his hum had returned, low and mournful, like the way water hums in stone before a spring is born. And when she smiled into the darkness and nodded, he felt, though he could not name it, that she had heard his waiting. "I've brought a song," she said, voice like dusk melting into starlight, and from the folds of her cloak she drew a small harp, silver, leaf-carved, old, and began to pluck something that sounded like wind playing among mallan leaves. Maulog did not breathe, for fear of frightening it away, the music or the moment or both. It was not a song of sorrow nor of joy, but a song of stillness, as if the world itself had paused to listen. And Maulog, who had never known music, but the groaning of earth and the ringing of hammers, felt something open in him, slow and raw, like the cracking of old stone touched by spring. He crept a little closer, not fully into the light, not yet, but close enough that she might see the glint of his eyes, those small molten pools, trembling now like candlelight in wind. And when her gaze found his, she did not look away, she did not flinch. Instead, she whispered, "There you are." And the gentleness in those 3 words shattered something vast and ancient within him. They did not speak often. She would hum or play, and he would echo with low tones of stone, with soft vibrations through the rock that made the cave itself resonate like a bell in slow toll. She began to bring small things, pieces of sky in the form of blue flowers, fragments of bark that smelled of sunlight, honey sealed in wax, and once a tiny mirror in which Maulog saw himself for the first time in over 1,000 years. He did not recognize the shape, twisted and worn, half melted in places, skin like broken slate. And yet, when she held the mirror beside her own reflection, she smiled, as if no difference troubled her at all. "Your voice is like the earth." "Dreaming," she told him once, and he nearly turned to water from it. For he had never been called beautiful, nor anything but beast. And now he began to hum, not for the mountain, but for her. He began to gather stones that sparkled and place them where her light would fall. He began to listen, not just to her, but to the way silence curled around her breath. He began, in quiet secret, to hope. And one night, just one, he dared step into her lantern light, fully, no longer hiding in half-shade or trick of flicker. He stood tall, taller than any elf or man, his shoulders hunched from long years, his arms carved in scars and rough lines, his fingers like roots, twisted but steady. She stood as well and did not step back. She reached up and with trembling grace touched his cheek. And Maulog, born of flame and pain, made not for love but for war, closed his eyes and leaned into the warmth. For the first time, he thought, perhaps the song of stone and sky could hold him too. The grove in the cave. She brought it cupped in both hands like a secret flame, though it was no fire, only a seed, small and pale, cradled in a bit of damp cloth. Maulog watched her approach as he always did now, not with fear, but with the aching stillness of one who waits for sun in a world that knows only stone. She stepped into the cave's hush with soft breath and a glint in her eyes, and without a word, knelt by the place where roots kissed water. "I found it in the vale," she said, as if speaking to the earth rather than to him. "Beneath, the watch of a tree that remembers the stars." Maulog crept closer, slow as morning over mountains, and watched as she pressed her fingers into the soft earth beneath the cave pool's edge. He had seen nothing grow here before, not in an age, and yet she touched the soil as if it still remembered green. "What is it?" he asked, voice like old bark breaking, rarely used and always rough. She smiled as if the sound pleased her and whispered, "A whisper of Telperion, or perhaps only a dream of it. I do not know, but I believe it will. Grow here if you sing to it." Maulog stared at the seed as if it were a fragment of starlight fallen into his world. He knelt, unsure, awkward, his great limbs slow and deliberate, and hovered his hand above the earth where she had planted. The tiny thing. He did not understand how such frail life could live in such dark stone. But he remembered her words. "Your voice is like the earth dreaming," and so he hummed deep and low, a resonance that traveled through his chest and into the floor, into the roots, into the seed. She returned each evening to tend the soil and speak to it softly, and Maulog joined her, unsure if it was the plant or the moments that grew between them that he truly watched. And one dusk, faint as breath on glass, a stem appeared, pale and slender, crowned with a single folded bud. Maulog recoiled, stunned, and the elf laughed, a sound like wind through leaves, and said, "You see, even stone remembers light." Began carving around it then, not to cage it, but to cradle it, smoothing walls, shaping stones into spirals and bowls where water would gather. He pulled minerals from the deeper rock, soft clay and glistening quartz, and lined the tiny pool with care. Her gift had become sacred, not because it grew, but because it meant he could grow too. Nights passed and the stem lengthened, leaves unfurled like sleeping hands. And on the 10th night when she arrived, Maulog had placed one of the glowing stones he had found deep in the fault lines near the blossom. It cast a gentle, ghostly light over the little grove, and her eyes welled with something like joy. She touched his arm that night, not by accident, but with purpose. Her hand rested over a place where his skin was notched by battles long forgotten, and she held it there warm and still. "You have a gentler heart than many of my kin," she said. And Maulog, who had never thought of himself as having a heart at all, felt it bloom open, trembling and slow, like the flower before them. He began to dream more clearly now, not only of her voice or of forests, but of walking beside her in light, of laughter shared in places without ceilings, of her hand always near, her presence always certain. And though he never spoke, he wondered, could such a thing be more than dream? Could it be real if she chose to stay? But for now they were together, and the cave was no longer cold. The humming of stone had changed. It sang now of possibility. Names we do not speak. The blossom opened on the 14th evening, slow and silver, a pale flame atop its slender stem. And in its glow, Maulog sat across from her, his great frame still as sculpture, watching the way the light curved around her cheeks and caught in her lashes. She smiled without words, then placed her harp beside the flower and said, "You never told me what you were before you hummed to stone." Maulog shifted, the gravel beneath him crackling softly like distant thunder. His eyes, those forge-born embers, fell low to the blossom, and for a long time he said nothing. Not because he refused her question, but because he feared the shape of the answer. "I was not meant to have a name," he said at last, voice like breaking granite. "Not a kind one. They called me Raugmar once, in the pits beneath Angband. It meant weapon wrought from ruin. I was shaped from fire and bone, forced to march against elves and men alike. I do not remember my first breath, only the sound of screaming steel. She did not flinch, she did not retreat. Instead, she whispered, 'And when did you become Maulog?'" He blinked, slow and uncertain. "You named me," he said, "the first night." It sounded gentler. The elf's gaze softened, her eyes shimmering like stars caught in dew, and she whispered, "Then let it be your true name." Maulog felt something shift deep in his chest, something buried in coils and soot, something that had never known. It ached, not in pain, but like stone cracking from sudden warmth, and with it came a memory not his own, a battle, a face, fire in the sky, and a blade that should have ended him but did not. "There were others," he said, his voice distant, as if reaching through time. "Creatures like me, shaped in the same pits. Most were lost in the wars. Some were destroyed when Angband fell, but I fled, not from courage, but from something worse. Doubt. I did not want to fight anymore, not even to die with purpose. I hid in the dark, hoping time would undo. And yet," she said, her voice a breeze between roots, "you chose stillness instead of blood, silence instead of hate. That was a choice. That was the first song." He looked at her, unsure how to carry so many soft things inside his ruined frame. But she seemed to see through the years, past the burns and the war, past the name Raugmar, into the quiet stone of his heart. They sat in silence, the kind that hummed, and the flower between them glowed a little brighter. She reached into her satchel and drew out a scrap of parchment, a sketch of something he did not recognize. "This," she said, "is the glade I was born in, a place of quiet trees and silver ponds. One day, I want to show it to you." And for a moment, Maulog dared to believe it could be so. A monster walking where children played, a relic reborn. But even in that moment of stillness, he felt it, the edge of something distant yet approaching, like cold wind through cracks in stone. She would not always stay. He did not know when nor how, but he had lived long enough to hear the tremble in time's breath. Still he hummed, for her, for the flower, for the name she gave him, for the possibility that some songs did not end in silence. The footsteps beyond the roots. The mountain had been silent for so long, Maulog could feel the difference when it changed. A tremble, slight and low, moving not through the stone but through something older, something deeper. He sat by the blossom that now bloomed full, and silver with tiny star-shaped petals, and he listened as he always did. But this was not the hum of roots, nor the pulse of his elven friend's quiet breath. This was a rhythm made of bootstep and metal and command. He rose, slow and unsure, and pressed his palm to the stone wall. Yes, there it was, a pulse not his own, pressing closer. When she arrived that night, later than usual and breathless from the climb, her eyes held a strange gleam. Not fear, but something near to it, like the edge of a story she did not want to speak. She knelt by the blossom, then looked up at him and whispered, "They've come, scouts from Linden. They followed the light." Maulog tilted his head, a motion more beast than man, and rumbled low, "They saw the flower?" She nodded. "The glowing stone, the humming. They thought it was some relic of the enemy. I tried to tell them there's nothing here, but they're elves of the old houses. They don't believe in creatures changing form or purpose. Not truly." Maulog turned away toward the deeper dark, the place where stone narrowed and memory grew sharp. "Will they come here?" "I don't know," she said, softer now. "But I fear they will. I don't know what they'll do if they find you." He did not ask if she would protect him, not because he doubted her heart, but because he knew the weight of the world outside these walls. She stepped forward and touched his arm again, gentle, firm, real. "I will return tomorrow," she said. "If I do not, wait 3 nights, then go." Maulog could not speak. He only hummed, low and steady, the same note he hummed when the blossom first stirred. Beneath soil, she kissed the side of his great hand, the part least scarred, and vanished like moonlight swallowed by mist. That night, Maulog did not hum. He sat beside the blossom, watching its silver dance fade and pulse like a heartbeat. Uncertain of its rhythm, and beyond the roots, past the place where the cave curved into black, he heard it again. Boots scraping stone, armor shifting like old teeth. The mountain was no longer asleep. "Where shadows know my name." He waited. 3 nights passed in silence, so thick it folded in on itself, heavier even than the stone. The blossom dimmed, sensing perhaps the change, its petals folding inward like small hands clutching a forgotten prayer. And Maulog remained. Beside it, unmoving, his vast form hunched over like a relic carved by grief, his hum locked inside his chest. She had not returned. The scouts had not come deeper, not yet. But he could hear them still, camped above, whispering in a tongue too sharp, too cold, a language that once drove him into hiding. They spoke of the light, of ancient wards, of rumors of creatures lost in the dark. And though they had not spoken his name, Maulog knew they sought something they did not understand. But the shadows did, for there were older things than elves in these mountains. And Maulog remembered their whispers, the things born not of flesh but of malice, the things who called him brother once, things he had fled from when he fled the war. And now they stirred again, curious perhaps or hungry, sensing the touch of elf-light in places that had long belonged to shadow. He went deeper, just once, into the place even he rarely tread, through a narrow throat of black stone that scraped his shoulders and pressed his memories into marrow. It was here, in the deepest hall of silence, that the shadows moved. Not with form, not with breath, but with remembrance. Rogmar, they whispered, not aloud, but through the bones of the cave. Rogmar returns, flame-born kin of ash. He pressed his hands to his ears, though he could not stop them. Not truly. They knew him not as Maulog, not as the creature who hummed to soil and watched flowers bloom. They knew the name carved into him with fire and screamed into him through battle. But he stood there still, listening, and not to them, but to what they could no longer see, for he had changed, and they had not. I buried him, Maulog whispered, barely more than breath, deep beneath root and love. I chose silence. Over fury, I chose the cave. I chose her. And the shadows recoiled, for such choices are anathema to darkness. He returned to the blossom and sat once more, gentler now. He brushed the folded petals with a single finger, careful as one might handle a sleeping bird, and slowly, softly he began to hum again, not for her, not yet, but for himself, for the self she had shown him he could be. If they came, he would not run. If she returned, he would still be here, no longer hiding, no longer Rogmar, but Maulog, stone singer, root watcher, last dream of the cavern bloom, and in the quiet between hums, he whispered, I remember who I am, because she did. When the lantern fails, she did not come on the fourth night, nor the fifth, and when the sixth fell silent and still, Maulog knew something had broken in the thread of their time. He sat beside the blossom, now half-closed and paling, its silver glow trembling, as if caught between sleep and departure. His hum had grown softer, more fragile, barely enough to keep the walls from sinking in on him. He did not blame her, not truly. The elves above did not understand the bloom, or the humming stone, or the creature they feared but had not seen. They would have asked questions, made demands, and she, gentle as she was, had always walked between worlds, root and leaf, dark and light. Perhaps they had taken her back into the trees and starlit halls. Perhaps she had gone willingly to protect him. Or perhaps she had simply chosen not to return. It was this last thought that gripped him the tightest, like frost around flame. The cave felt different now, not empty, but too full of memory. He looked around and saw the smooth stone he had, shaped for her comfort, the low channel where he'd let the water flow more gently, the alcove where he had placed the glowing crystals so her eyes could rest. Everything here whispered her. He reached into the little basin where once she'd left a folded bit of cloth, a song written in ink, and he held it now, worn and smudged. He could no longer read the marks, but he remembered the way she had sung them. Maulog hummed that song now, low and without rhythm, just breath and tone and longing. And the cave answered as it always did. Then the lantern flickered, not hers. It hadn't been lit since her last visit. But the light from the blossom, its silver glow, once strong enough to make shadows shrink, dimmed, blinked, and pulsed faintly. Maulog leaned close, both hands around it, not to hold, but to warm, to shield. Not yet, he whispered. Not while I still remember. Her voice. But flowers are not kept alive by memory, and light does not linger out of pity. As the glow faded to a soft shimmer, Maulog did not cry. He did not know how. Instead, he lowered his head to the root-veined soil and lay beside the blossom, His great frame curled like a cradle around it, his breath slow, the hum within his chest growing fainter. She had brought him life, but she had also taught him sorrow. He hummed once more, a song not of stone but of farewell, a song of her hands and her songs, and the way she once touched the side of his face without fear. And as the last glow faded, Maulog whispered her name, not aloud, but into the earth, where it might take root, even if she never returned. Elarin. He had never dared ask it before. She had never offered. But he had heard it once, spoken by a starling she had sung to, and he had held it inside like a secret lantern. Now it flickered one last time and went out. The morning stone. The blossom did not return to light. Days passed, or perhaps only hours. Time in the mountain had always moved like breath in sleep, unmeasured, undemanding. And now, in the hush that followed her absence, Maulog did not count the hours as he once had. He remained by the place where the flower had lived, his body stilled like carved basalt, breath so soft the cave no longer hummed. Even the stones had grown quiet. He did not know if she had lived, if she had been taken, if she had simply forgotten. That was the hardest pain, the most shapeless wound, the wondering. But he did not curse her. She had come when the world had abandoned him, and for a time she had taught him not to fear the light. And though she had left, though the glow had gone, he could still feel her presence where she once knelt. In the roots, in the walls, in the shape of the light he remembered. He touched the soil once more, not to find the blossom, but to bury it. Gently, without grief, like returning a gift he was never meant to keep forever. He pressed the petals down into the softened earth, and over them, with hands rough from ruin, he shaped a single stone, smooth, small, shaped by hums instead of hammers. It bore no name, no carving, but it sang when the wind passed through the cracks of the cave, a single soft note, almost like a memory. The morning stone, they would later call it. Those few who dared wander the deeper places of the mountain, who followed the strange lullaby carried in the roots of the world. And some said a great beast lived there, neither wholly dark nor wholly light, a creature made of war and love and silence. And though none ever saw him, they swore the cave still hummed, and that sometimes on nights when the stars were hidden and the trees bent low in wind, the hum took on the shape of a woman's name. Elarin. Elarin. Maulog did not leave. He did not need to. He had already walked from what he was, and that was enough. He had loved. He had changed. He had been remembered, and in the silence beneath the mountain, a new story was born. One without victory or ending, only the steady, low song of something that once dared to bloom. Thank you for listening, dear dreamer. If you're still with me, I hope this quiet tale helped guide you gently toward rest. In the dark corners of Middle-earth, even sorrow can shape beauty. And sometimes, even a monster can hum the world back to life. If you enjoyed this tale, please remember to subscribe, leave a gentle like, and explore the playlist for more ASMR bedtime stories across the realms of fantasy. Your next dream may already be waiting. Sleep well, and may your night be wrapped in stars. Until next time.